Speak less, listen more. The Dharma Way. He didn't hit his son. He didn't scream, but he destroyed him with silence, sarcasm, and I'm just being honest. Until one day, the boy disappeared, and the father had to learn the truth. The loudest pain is often the one you never hear. Mr. Daniel was known for many things: his intelligence, his discipline, his commanding presence in the classroom, but perhaps most of all, for the sharpness of his words. He was a respected teacher, a perfectionist, a man who believed that honesty, blunt, unfiltered honesty, was a virtue above all. He didn't raise his voice often, but when he spoke, it cut deeper than a shout ever could. To the outside world, Daniel was strong, clear, decisive. But inside his home, his words echoed differently. They carried weight, sometimes too much. His wife had once told him gently, "You don't always have to be right, Daniel. Sometimes you just need to be kind." He had brushed it off with a sigh and a quote from a philosopher. He thought kindness came after truth, but he never stopped to ask, whose truth? His son, Leo, was everything Daniel wasn't. Quiet, gentle, artistic, sensitive. While Daniel lived by logic, Leo lived in colors, in silence, in feelings he could never quite name. He painted instead of speaking, drew emotions he couldn't voice. Daniel didn't understand it. He wanted his son to be tough, focused. "The world isn't soft," he'd say. "You have to sharpen yourself to survive it." When Leo brought home a sketchbook filled with dreamlike paintings, Daniel flipped through it silently. Then he closed it and said, "This won't feed you when you're 30. Leo's face fell. He didn't argue. He never did. He just walked away quietly, as he always had. Daniel thought he was building strength in his son. He didn't realize he was building walls. On Leo's 17th birthday, Daniel gave him a book on economics and a long lecture about responsibility. Leo nodded, thanked him, and said nothing. That night, Leo left. No confrontation, no drama, just a folded letter on the kitchen table. "Dear Dad, you always told me to speak clearly, but every time I tried, I felt smaller. You said you wanted the best for me, but it always sounded like I wasn't enough. I stopped talking because I learned it didn't matter what I said. You'd already made up your mind. I'm not leaving to punish you. I'm leaving to find myself before I forget who I am. I hope one day you'll hear what I never said." Leo. Daniel read the letter 100 times. At first he was angry, then confused, then afraid. He called everyone, friends, classmates, relatives. No one knew where Leo had gone. He contacted the police, reported a missing person, but they told him Leo was nearly an adult and had left by choice. There was nothing they could do. Days passed, then weeks, then months. No word, no clue, just silence. Daniel's house, once filled with structure and order, now felt hollow. He kept replaying every conversation they'd had, every moment he'd dismissed Leo's feelings, every time he'd said, "Stop being so sensitive." One evening, unable to sleep, Daniel wandered the city without direction. His feet took him to a quiet street he'd never noticed before. At the end stood a small Buddhist temple, glowing softly under the moonlight. He stood outside, hesitant. Then, drawn by something he couldn't explain, he stepped inside. An elderly monk greeted him with a calm smile. "You look like a man who's been shouting into a void." Daniel gave a hollow laugh. "I've spent my whole life speaking. Now, there's no one left to hear me." The monk gestured toward a bench. "Then perhaps it's time to stop speaking." Daniel sat down. "I came here looking for my son.
I thought maybe he'd come here. The monk closed his eyes. We receive many who are lost. Some seek answers, some seek silence. Both are welcome. Daniel hesitated, then asked, "What do you think hurts more, words said or words never spoken?" The monk opened his eyes slowly. "It is not the words themselves, but the intention behind them that wounds. A knife is useful unless it cuts without care." Daniel lowered his head. "I thought I was helping him, preparing him for life, but now I don't know anymore." The monk offered a simple suggestion. "Stay here 7 days, no talking, just listening." Daniel blinked. "Listening to what?" "To yourself," the monk said, "and to the silence between your thoughts." He didn't plan to accept, but something in him, something tired and wounded, agreed. And so, for the first time in his adult life, Daniel stopped speaking. The first day was restless. His mind buzzed with arguments, explanations, regrets. But on the second day, he began to notice the sound of wind through bamboo, the rhythm of footsteps on stone, the softness of a bird landing on the roof. By the fourth day, his thoughts began to soften. Instead of just hearing his own justifications, he began to remember Leo's face, moments when he had wanted to be seen, not corrected. He remembered the look in Leo's eyes when Daniel interrupted him, the way Leo's shoulders would drop when he dismissed his dreams. By day 6, Daniel wept, not loudly, not dramatically, just quiet, steady tears that fell into his hands. He realized he had spent his life speaking to be understood, but never listening to understand. And he understood finally what Leo had meant when he wrote, "I hope one day you'll hear what I never said." On the 7th day, Daniel broke the silence, not with a speech, but with a single whispered promise to himself. "I will listen now, truly." The 7th day arrived quietly, like a secret. Mr. Daniel stood outside the temple at dawn, barefoot on the cool stone. The monk approached him, not with a smile nor a question, but with 2 cups of tea. They sat together beneath a Bodhi tree in complete silence. Then the monk spoke, not to break the silence, but to honor it. "Silence," he said, "is not the absence of sound. It is the beginning of listening." Daniel nodded slowly. "I've never heard so much, until I stopped talking." The monk handed him a folded cloth. "This was left here yesterday. Someone came and asked about you. They didn't leave a name." Inside the cloth was a sketch, hand-drawn, soft pencil lines forming a familiar scene. A father and a son standing near a riverbank, both facing away, the silence between them almost visible. Daniel's hands trembled. He knew the drawing style, knew the hand that made it. "Leo," the monk said, "sometimes when we stop searching with our eyes, what we seek returns through the heart." Daniel clutched the cloth to his chest. He felt something stir, not hope, not joy, but a quiet readiness. Later that day, he asked to stay longer. "Not to find my son," he told the monk, "but to find myself." The monk agreed. Daniel was given simple duties: sweeping, preparing food, tending the garden. For the first time in decades, his world slowed down. He noticed how the rice crackled when poured into a wooden bowl, how the flowers bent ever so slightly to greet the sun. He also noticed something else, the way the younger monks treated one another. They listened not just with ears, but with eyes, with presence, with stillness. One evening, while sweeping dried leaves, Daniel heard the soft sobbing of a young novice. The boy sat near the back wall, hiding his face. Daniel approached and knelt beside him without a word. He didn't ask what was wrong. He didn't try to solve anything. He just stayed. The boy cried for minutes that felt like hours. Eventually, he whispered, "Thank you for not asking me why I'm crying." Daniel looked at him gently. "I don't need to know the reason. I just needed to let you know you're not alone." That night, Daniel wrote in his journal, "This is what I never gave Leo. Space to feel, space to not explain." Days passed, then weeks. And with each passing day, Daniel's need to be heard melted into a deeper desire to understand. He began noticing echoes of Leo in other people. The shy apprentice who hesitated to speak. The gardener who hummed songs while working. The elder monk who watched the stars like they were old friends. Each of them taught him something about his son, about himself, about the Dharma. One afternoon, the monk told Daniel, "Tomorrow you must go. Your path is calling elsewhere." Daniel didn't resist. He simply bowed. That night, as he packed, he placed the sketch from Leo between the pages of his journal. Then he whispered aloud, "Wherever you are, son, I will wait, not to speak, but to listen." He left the temple at dawn as quietly as he had arrived. Back in the city, everything felt louder, faster, harsher. But Daniel was different now. He no longer judged every noise. He listened to the man arguing with a bus driver, to the child crying in the grocery store, to the woman begging for coins with trembling hands, and instead of reacting, he sat with it, let it move through him, responded with presence. One rainy evening, while volunteering at a local food shelter, Daniel noticed a familiar figure across the room. A young man, quiet, wearing a hood, cleaning paintbrushes in the corner. Daniel's heart skipped. He approached slowly, didn't call out, didn't speak. He simply walked over, sat beside the young man and began drying brushes with him. Minutes passed. Neither spoke.
Then the boy whispered without turning, "It took you long enough." Daniel smiled softly. I didn't know where to look. Leo finally looked at him. His eyes were tired, older than they should have been, but not angry, just cautious. "You used to talk a lot," Leo said. "I used to think talking meant love," Daniel replied. "And now?" "Now," Daniel said, "I think love listens first." Leo blinked hard. His hands stopped moving. Daniel reached into his coat and pulled out a notebook. Inside was a blank page. He slid it across. "This time," he said, "you draw. I'll listen." Leo didn't speak, but he opened the book, took a pencil, and began to sketch. Daniel watched, not the lines, but the stillness, the healing in every stroke. Have you ever hurt someone just by not listening? Or have you been the one left unheard? Share. Is silence a sign of weakness or wisdom? Should we always speak our truth, even when it wounds? Or is restraint the real power? Daniel had found Leo, but their journey was far from over, because the real healing wasn't in the reunion. It was in what they both chose to let go of next. It had been 3 weeks since Daniel and Leo had reunited at the shelter. They met almost every day now, not as father and son, not yet, but as two men quietly rebuilding something that had once been torn apart by words, or the lack of them. Leo still didn't speak much, but his presence had softened. His movements no longer screamed, "I'm guarded." His eyes met Daniel's without flinching. That, for now, was enough. Daniel never asked him to come home. He no longer believed in forcing closeness. He believed in space, in time, in presence. One afternoon, as they walked side by side through the city park, Leo suddenly stopped. "You remember that time," he began, "when I was 9.
and I showed you the painting I did of the sky. Daniel froze. Leo continued. You looked at it, then said, it's unrealistic. Sky's never that purple. I was trying to help, Daniel said softly. I know, Leo replied, but I stopped painting skies for years after that. Daniel lowered his gaze. I remember, you started drawing buildings, empty ones. Leo nodded, because they didn't feel judged. Silence stretched between them, not heavy but honest. I'm sorry, Daniel said. Not just for that. For every time I tried to fix you, instead of understanding you. Leo took a deep breath. You don't need to apologize forever, Dad. I think I needed the distance to grow without the noise. They sat on a bench. Leo pulled out a sketchbook and flipped to a new drawing. It showed two trees, one older, gnarled, rooted deep, the other young, flexible, growing beside it, reaching for light. There was a time, Leo said, when I thought I'd never speak to you again. Daniel didn't flinch. I thought I'd lost you forever. You did, Leo said quietly. But you found me differently. Daniel asked, are we okay now? Leo thought for a moment, then replied, we're beginning. Daniel smiled. That's more than I deserve. Leo looked at him. It's not about deserving, it's about choosing. That night, Daniel visited the temple again. Not as a seeker this time, but as a man who had walked through a storm and returned with a deeper kind of silence. The monk was there, lighting candles. I found my son, Daniel said. Or maybe I found myself beside him. The monk looked up. You have learned the Dharma Way. You did not chase, you listened. And when the time came, you received without demanding. I used to think parenting meant shaping a child, Daniel confessed. And now? The monk asked. Now I believe it means learning from them, holding space for who they already are. The monk smiled. You've met your karma, and you didn't fight it. Daniel bowed deeply. As he turned to leave, the monk added, there's one more thing. He handed Daniel a folded letter. It came 2 days ago, addressed to you. Daniel opened it. The handwriting was unmistakably Leo's. Dear Dad, you once told me that silence is weakness, but now I've seen it as strength. Because in your silence I found safety. In your stillness I found space. You taught me how words can hurt, but now you've shown me how presence can heal. Thank you for staying when I was hard to reach. Thank you for hearing what I never said. I'm coming home, not because I have to, but because I want to. Love, Leo. Daniel held the letter to his chest, eyes full of tears, not of sadness, but of quiet joy. He whispered, this is enough. 2 weeks later, they stood together in Leo's childhood room, repainting the walls, not to erase the past, but to begin again. Leo chose a soft purple. Daniel said nothing, but this time, he smiled. Have you ever healed a broken relationship, not through words, but through presence? What did silence teach you about love? Do all relationships deserve reconciliation? Or are some wounds too deep to return from? What would you have done in Leo's place? Sometimes the most powerful way to love someone is to listen to what they can't say out loud.